Classroom dialogue and questioning is one of the key features of assessment for learning. And the reason that's so is because what you need to do is try and find out what's inside children's heads. Too often in the past, teachers have asked questions that where children have to try and guess what's inside the teacher's head, the expert's head. But it's actually much more fruitful to switch it around and do it the other way. Because we want to find out not just what do children know, but what do they partly know and what don't they know. Because dealing with what they partly know and what they don't know means that you can actually then set up learning experiences to make those into knows, and that's what shoots children's learning forward.
Pupils must be involved actively in their learning. You don't learn by taking in messages from people and just remembering them. You learn if you start from your existing understanding and then a change and challenge. And in order to take on that change and challenge, you've got to be involved. So what that means in the classroom is that the teacher has to help the pupils to express themselves.
In recent years, formative assessment's been increasingly seen as key to raising standards and improving teaching and learning. At its heart lies effective questioning and discussion. In this programme, Paul Black and Chris Harrison, leading authorities on formative assessment, explain why they see questioning as central to effective learning.
Questions asked by the teacher play a very important part in the dialogue in classrooms. And one has to, again, think carefully what they're for. If you're asking questions which are closed questions, that is, there's one answer, often a one-word answer, like what's the unit of force? Well, there's only one word. You either got it right or wrong. There's no thinking involved. And it may be worth asking just to check that a class has got all that and not confused about it, but it's not going to advance thinking very much. It's a sort of check-up closed question.
An open question would be one where you're asking something like, people often describe friction as being the opposite of slipperiness. What do you think? Just by using the term, what do you think, they're getting straight into the idea that their opinion's being asked. One of the schools we took this into, the children started working on this, and they changed those to being fat or skinny questions. So a fat question is one that they defined as wanting more than 5 words in the answer, whereas a skinny question was less than 5 words. And so a fat question, a high-order question, promotes thinking, promotes discussion, and that's really where the evidence comes for the teacher to move the formative assessment forward.
Teachers from 2 schools, Lord Williams and Bishop Hatfield, have been working closely with Paul and Chris in their research on classroom discussion, and they will be showing us effective strategies that can be used to encourage questioning and dialogue. At Lord Williams School in Oxfordshire, John Ryder uses open questions to provoke discussion amongst his Year 11 science class.
What we're looking at today is another one of those really big questions. Are we alone in the universe?
To create a good learning environment, you must start an activity with some evidence, some question, some task, which gets pupils thinking into it. And then you have to encourage them to talk.
Okay. In groups of 2 or 3, I'd like you to think about those 3 questions, discuss them, and also one person in your group just jot down some thoughts in the back of your book. I used to have discussions where I thought that everyone was involved, and it seemed that lots of people weren't. And I think here, every kid has actually engaged with the task and they've talked to each other about it, and I hope they know the structure of the discussion that's coming, and so they know they're going to have to listen to each other in the discussion that follows.
Often teachers allocate particular groups that become a talking group or a talking pair or talking partners. And this is so that the children can actually, when they get a question, can talk through the question, can give the benefit of sort of jigsawing their ideas together to get a group idea. And this allows them to sort out some problems as they're actually doing that. It also means when they come to actually answering the whole class feedback that they can usually say more than most individuals actually would say. So it actually helps promote the whole class feedback as well.
One of our responsibilities is to make sure that we get kids to think in our lessons. And if we're not doing that, then I don't think we're necessarily teaching them. I think we also need to find questions that kids aren't going to find easy. If they're all easy one-word answers in a lesson, then what have the kids learnt through the process of that lesson?
At Bishop Hatfield School in Hertfordshire, Alf Wood encourages his pupils to generate their own questions as a way of involving them in their learning.
I'm going to show you a picture which shows one event from the Civil War and you have to return to your group, and on the piece of paper on your tables, you have to write any questions you have about that picture. Ultimately what I'm trying to do is to get them to get much more depth to what the pictures show. If I just show them the picture, they might tell me one or two things about what it shows, but not really dig into it. So hopefully through the questions, they'll dig much more deeply into the source.
What's the next question?
All right, what I'm going to ask you to do is choose in your group one question which you think is a particularly good question and a possible answer. Your group, Alice?
The question was, what event does the picture show? And we thought that it was like a meeting of Parliament.
Very good. This group over here?
Who was the man wearing the big pointy hat? We thought it could have been Charles.
Very good. What we're trying to do is get them to think about what they're doing, and if they give them too much direction, they don't think about, all they think about is knowledge and understanding, and they don't think about high level questions about theories and ideas and analysis. And what we're trying to do is encourage those skills lower down so they become more independent in their work. So when they need those skills higher up at A-level and GCSE, then they've got them already in the bank.
Teachers ask questions all the time, and many teachers aren't aware of what their questions are doing. So, a really useful thing to do is to plan questions, and not just to plan them in terms of a good question, but to think about what might be the possible answers that come out, and therefore what will I do with these answers if they do come out from the children.
We use questioning in our planning much more than we ever used to. I think in the past, the planning used to be, this is the section of the book we're using, these are some of the things that they could do, whereas now we're really thinking about, well, what questions can we ask about it, or what questions can the pupils ask about it.
If it's a discussion in the scheme of work, it will say what the lead question is, what the big question is that's worth getting the kids into groups, and it will suggest an amount of time, 2 or 3 minutes, discussion in groups, then collect back, and these are some follow-up questions that you might have ready. So certainly the questioning is a really important part of the planning, I think, and I didn't necessarily do that before.
An important strategy in making questions work well is to allow pupils time to think. What's devastating is the research evidence by Mary Budrow and others, where they measured the time interval in a classroom between the teacher asking a question and, if they didn't get an answer, asking another question or answering their own question. So what they're looking at is how much time does the teacher allow pupils to think before they answer. And the average is about 0.7 to 0.9 of a second. That's terribly short. Nobody can think out something during such a short time. They either know it or they don't.
Karen Veer uses wait time as a strategy to encourage her pupils at Lord Williams to take an active part in their maths lessons.
I want you to just think for a minute. Don't try and put into words just yet. Just try to think how we would work out the length of that part of the circle. It's called the arc length.
Tolerating a buzzard talk when you as teacher are doing nothing, it's a bit scary, but it is the only way the classroom can become a place where thinking takes place, rather than being dragged along the teacher's route to get the right answers.
When wait time is increased, we find that not only do more children start to answer, but the answers they start to give are longer. And so therefore we're achieving the goal that we actually want to, in that children actually are revealing what's inside their heads.
Okay, time. Can you try and tell me how you think you might find out the length of that arc there?
Would it be the arc length would be pi times diameter divided by 4?
Oh, that sounds pretty good to me. What do we think of that?
And I think if you actually give a child a chance to talk to their partner, not in a great big way, just to say, right, I've got 2 minutes now to discuss with your partner what you think the answer is, and then I want one of you to come back to me. And then if you don't tell them which group you're going to choose, and you don't ask for any hands up, you just say, okay, Chloe, what do you think? I think provided you give them the time and they know they've discussed it with somebody else, or at least one other person thinks that answer's sensible, they don't feel so embarrassed about saying their response in front of the whole class.
How No Hands usually works is that the teacher sets a good formative question, so an open question or a question that's going to be challenging, and then either gives time for the child to think, so gives wait time, or allows pupils to discuss in small groups before taking an answer. The teacher then selects who's going to answer. Right? It's not children shouting out and everybody having their say, but it's just that no hands are put up, because what the teacher's not asking for are who thinks they can answer. What she will feel is that if they've talked about it, they all are actually capable of giving an answer.
At Bishop Hatfield School, Carol Wilding uses whiteboards to help all her pupils participate in their history lesson.
So today, the first thing I want to do as a starter is I want to look at this picture on the board. And I'd like you on your whiteboards just to write down some ideas. What is this picture telling us about Hitler? Anything that comes in immediately into your minds.
Right, in that particular group I found they have been very effective, because that group is very quiet and there's only 2 or 3 students that actually tend to respond, and it gets very boring. So this gives an opportunity for me to really be aware of who's thinking.
Right, can you put your boards up please, ladies? Well done, yeah, good, strong leader, excellent. He's in...
Because if they've all got to put their whiteboards up, they've all got to have been thinking about the question. So I can look around, and also I don't have to give ownership at that point to a particular student. So if they've said something really good, or perhaps it's not quite right, I don't have to, they're not going to be exposed. So I can see something on a whiteboard and I can ignore it, and I can pick on something, you know, which is really, really good. And I can give ownership or not ownership to it, depending on how the lesson's going.
The point of it is to establish that this is not a competition to see who's fastest at getting a good answer. It's a place in which everybody has to think, and since everybody's supposed to think, and I'm trying to help everybody to do it, anybody ought to be able to offer an answer.
If I just do quick question answer, they don't have the time to think and they don't process information. They also have to take a risk in terms of peer pressure in answering a question, putting their hand up and answering a question. And if they know that in their group they've shared the ideas and they've got something to say, then they're much more confident to do that.
In some classrooms, what pupils feel is that, you know, it's maybe embarrassing to try and answer a teacher's question, because either your peers may laugh at you because either you give a good or a bad answer, or maybe they're just a shy sort of child who doesn't normally speak. What teachers do who develop formative practices are create learning environments where children do want to have their say, do want to answer.
So it's a very open environment. They can get things wrong and it's not laughed at, it's not sniggered at. It's just taken as a reasonable suggestion. Why did we get that? And what should we have got? And nobody's left embarrassed about it at all.
When you ask a question, the class are worried that if they get it wrong, you're going to think badly of them and give some negative feedback. Which we try to avoid doing anyway when they do answer questions, try and be positive about their answers. But I think if they've set the questions themselves, they're much less worried about whether or not they've got it right, because they've kind of set the agenda in the first place.
What tends to happen in classrooms is that answers tend to not be rewarded because they're right answers, but answers get rewarded because they're interesting, because they take the whole group's discussion forward. So it's not that you only get some children who can answer and some children who can't. Sometimes wrong answers or interesting quirks of answers can be very, very useful within the classroom.
So you've got to get away from the label as wrong. You'll have shocks and things may be said which are way off beam in ways you've never imagined. But that's where that pupil is. You've got to work to help them to move from that place. That's the task. So the issue is, and I wouldn't pretend it's easy, it's quite hard work. What can I say to people who have that idea? How can I get them to see that that idea doesn't work? And that often makes heavy demands on your subject knowledge and on your understanding of pupils' thinking. But that's what the task of teaching is.